You're watching ASOTU CON 2024, presented in collaboration with Reynolds and Gubagoo.
All right. So we have our friends Lotlinx here. We've got Kelly Stoop. She is the Regional Vice President for Lotlinx, and John Foley, co-founder and president of Recharged. Today we're going to be talking about the EV inventory conundrum and strategies to move EV inventory faster. So I'm going to hand it on over. Take it away.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, now we got the coveted after lunch time slot, so hopefully you guys are gonna digest tacos and talk about inventory turn. Oh, thank you. That's probably helpful. I've got hands full. I'm a mom. This is what I do. All right, so hi everybody. I know I was like EV inventory and turn is like when I think about turning EV inventory, or when I talk to dealers about turning EV inventory, they all kind of look at me blankly and have like a 4-letter word in their mind, I think. But I do too, and the word is data. At Lotlinx, we pride ourselves on having a very large data set. We've been indexing all VIN level information as well as shopper demand data for over 12 years. So we like to think that we've got a lot of insights that help us to kind of understand the marketplace and get in front of it. EV inventory it's a funny topic right now. When I've been having conversations with dealers, they're either all about it, like my buddy here, John, and has really leaned in and figured out what to do with it. And then there's some, they're like, if they never gave me another EV, I'd be happy about it. So the thing about EV inventory is that it's a car just like every other car that dealers have to worry about selling, right? So today we'd like to talk about ways that you can use data and market insights to be able to turn that inventory faster, and then get some tips from John, who's been, figuring it out for how many years now?
Well, EVs just over a year now.
A year.
Yeah, I've done this for a long time now.
I was like, so what kind of prompted you to lean into selling EVs exclusively?
The actually funny story is that it started here at ASOTU CON, the first one, and I was just watching a presentation. I was kind of thinking about what I was going to do next, and I had some ideas, and I wasn't like this huge EV enthusiast or anything like that, but I was watching a presentation, and we're talking about this wave of EV inventory that was coming to market. It just kind of hit me like, well, man, there's so much focus on the new car side, to move these. A lot of that's pressure from, the OEMs, but there's no focus on the used car side, and so I decided to go build that focus. So.
Thankfully, you're doing so, because there's a lot of dealers that need advice on how to do that. Anne-Marie, I don't think this is working. Unless I'm not shooting it in the right direction. Technology. There we go. Perfect. So part of the thing that we do to help kind of understand the marketplace, whether it's EV inventory or it's any inventory in general, is use data to kind of visualize where our risk and opportunities might be. So what you're looking at here is what we call our VIN View Optimizer, or VVO. And what you see in terms of the graph is each line that's going up vertically represents a piece of inventory, and then the various colors represent a traffic source that are pushing traffic to that inventory. The dotted line that you see represents 30 VDPs, which is kind of the standard for how much traffic Google thinks that you should get in a 30-day period in order to turn that piece of inventory with any real sales velocity. But what we noticed is usually about 80% of what dealers are spending on their inventory lands on about 20% of their cars, right? So you can see that click candy. Usually it's what you'd consider your hot in market, the stuff that a dealer would say sells itself. Then you have the bottom of the rung, right? The stuff that's at the very bottom under that dotted line. That's typically your bread and butter inventory. And the point that we're trying to make here is that oftentimes, whether it's EV inventory or it's inventory that's not necessarily massaging all the algorithms to get the visibility, whether it be because of pricing, et cetera, they're sitting there waiting to be seen. And a car unseen is a car unsold. So a lot of times what we find is that EV inventory, or the inventory that maybe isn't getting the discounts or stuff. It's just not generating enough traffic for it to sell in a timely manner. So by using market data and by using this sort of visibility from a VIN perspective, it lets us know where we can focus our attention. And John, previous to being at Recharged, was how much inventory were you responsible for?
A bit over 2,000 cars.
Yeah, so a pretty good chunk of inventory. And as you can imagine, being able to manage and effectively control that much inventory and the visibility that was attached to it became probably pretty challenging, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So when you were responsible for 2,000 cars, across the country, we deployed this data set for his dealerships. How were you able to use the information, and what did it help you with, or what did it help you see?
Well, I think a few things, and not to state the obvious, but before you deploy any capital into marketing your inventory, you certainly need to make sure that everything else is right behind the scenes, and that you're prepared to handle any leads that you drive. So certainly from a pricing and merchandising standpoint and desirability, get all those things lined up, make sure your teams are prepared. But then, to really isolate the potential issues and, deploy a strategy to move that inventory more quickly. And it's critical, whether it's, the 50 cars I have today or, 2,500 cars, and more for others. So, understanding whether I need to make a pricing change, a market change, or any other change that'll drive, moving that car along. It's very helpful.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that really stood out when we were first working together and using the VVO to kind of understand the landscape was just seeing how much inventory was not visible, right? You spend money with your various partners and channels, and having a channel-first approach doesn't give you a lot of the control that you needed to get visibility across the breadth of the inventory, right? You kind of fell victim to the same sort of scenarios. You've got, the cool stuff or the hot and market cars that everybody wants to look at that was gobbling up the bulk of the budget. Meanwhile, you had all these very retail, ready units that were probably pretty margin rich that just weren't getting their shot at, being seen. So one of the things that we did with regards to strategy was focus on those things, right? So these types of data-driven strategies can be applied to any inventory, not just EV, right? So, but before John ended up at, or had the idea to make Recharge, he was selling, pre-owned inventory of the non-EV type. Did you guys have any EV inventory?
We did, and that was helpful much in launching Recharge. No, certainly that frontline experience, but yeah.
They probably fell into the same category, right? The waste and the risk. So being able to identify the waste and the risk is what allows us to be able to get ahead of it and make decisions. Part of the way that we also like to, this isn't just risk that happens as a result of not visibility, but there's a lot of things that factor into risk of a piece of inventory, right? So if you've got, from day one, when a dealer gets a piece of inventory, having machines that are indexing, consumer data, marketplace changes, demand, so on and so forth, it can predict risk well ahead of the time that we as humans would be able to say, oh crap, this has been here for 42 days and it's taken a various amount of markdowns, et cetera. So being able to use the data and market insights to kind of get ahead of where the profitability components might come into play has been helpful. What are some of the other things that you've run into being an operator with regards to making decisions that you...
Yeah, I've seen a lot over my career. Somebody acquires a 2018 F-150. They sell it in 3 days. They make a lot of money doing it. They go, man, I gotta go get more F-150s. But, understanding really, is there a market for that car right now? How many buyers are in the market? Is that, maybe I just got lucky, right? I got it at the right time, that buyer was in the market, and maybe the next one could be just as profitable, but I need to put it somewhere else, or definitely go find the right buyer for it. Yeah,
and that's true. It's how do you figure out what inventory is going to be? And exactly right. It's like, all right, this piece of inventory moved with, no real effort. You duplicate it, the market changes, the seasonality is impacted. There's incentives on new, and all of a sudden used, drops off. Like, how do we stay ahead of those things? And data in part, and also using machines to kind of help really target inventory at the bin level, especially the stuff that's fresh. I know that at Lotlinx, we originally had, kind of, not a scarlet letter, but we were branded with, give us your old, your dirty, the ugly, the stuff that doesn't necessarily move with any real profit or pace. And although we are really good at that, I think that in terms of being able to stay ahead of any sort of market changes, demand, and generally just focusing on profitability and efficiency, you are really in a good spot if you're able to identify risk from a very early, and it doesn't have to be necessarily risk, right? We see opportunity, right? If something is the freshest on your lot, typically does that make it the most margin rich?
No, not
necessarily.
Not
I guess if you have a price
like,
to move strategy.
Yeah, no, you would think. I mean, that should be the most profitable, but it's not always. You make a mistake during your acquisition, and move on. It might not be the most profitable for sure.
So let me ask you a question. So if you had, from a visibility standpoint, if you had the ability to kind of get ahead of it and know that you were able to utilize technology to kind of get that vehicle forward facing without having to kind of massage the algorithms that are geared towards pricing, does that have an overall impact on how you look at your pricing strategy?
And the short answer is yes, of course.
Obviously.
Yeah, and back to your point before. I mean, the idea that like Lotlinx is going to solve your problems by finding buyers for your at-risk inventory, I don't think is fair. If your inventory is at risk, there's probably a multitude of reasons that it is, and you should explore all of them. But certainly finding buyers is helpful.
Yeah, getting ahead of them eliminates or at least mitigates some risk. And you're exactly right. Like, just because you've got data that says there's X amount of buyers in the marketplace for a piece of inventory, what do we do if there's no buyers in the marketplace, right? I pulled up a piece of inventory that's on John's lot, and there are a lot of different factors that go into what we look at when we look at opportunity versus risk. But you're right. Like, if you have, I know it's kind of hard to see.
Like, which car is it?
It's the Rivian. No, it's not. It's the Kona. I think I had the Rivian originally, or maybe there's both. But the thing is that just because you have a piece of inventory that's got, let's go backwards. Let's see. It's really hard to read. It is the Kona. I'm just trying to see. So 68 days on lot, and we've had 75 total views, right? So this is a situation where maybe the visibility isn't as impacted, right? So if 30 VDPs is what Google says the standard is in terms of being able to move a piece of inventory with any real pace, and we've got 75, it's like, all right, well, what gives? What's going on here, right? But then you look at the quality factor. Like, what is the traffic that's being driven to that car? Are they really interested? And actually what I found is that with John's inventory, when I'm looking at the data, you have less propensity than like a typical franchise dealer to have that big variation, because I think you have such a deliberate shopper, right? I think that people who are interested in pre-owned EVs are very intentional about their journey. So I feel like you actually have been, in terms of traffic, in a really good spot. Like, when I was looking at John's VVO originally, his organic and direct traffic is, it's incredible. It's really good, because I think that from an EV, especially a pre-owned EV shopper, there's only X amount of inventory, although those numbers tend to keep going up. It's a very deliberate shopper. From a shopper experience, like, do you feel like that's the case once they get to the store?
Yeah, we're very fortunate right now, and I realize that will not last forever. So what we offer is unique, and it's definitely catered to an EV shopper. We're providing them with the data that they're looking for, and we're there to provide a great experience, answer their questions, and so on. And so I would say that people who are shopping for an EV, and especially the ones who have really committed themselves to purchasing a used EV, they'll go to great lengths to find a good match, inventory and experience, and they'll travel quite the distance to do it. And so we're fortunate. Like they stumble upon us, whether they're in Texas, New York, Florida, like they're finding us. But that won't last forever. I know.
Yeah. What did you say when we talked about this a little while ago? You're like, there's two types of EV customers. There's the ones that are like intentional and the curious.
Well, there's three. So there's like the EV buyer, repeat buyer, who's very easy. But the two first-time buyers that we see are curious and committed. And like the committed are close to being repeat buyers, in that like they've done a lot of research. They know they're going to buy an EV. And they just want somebody who can, help them to complete that. The EV curious are the ones that need a lot more hand-holding. They can.
So what do you do at the dealership to kind of help guide them through that process? Because I'm sure a lot of dealers that aren't focused just on EV inventory probably struggle with that. It's like, okay, it is a different, I would expect, experience from a salesperson perspective.
Yeah, it's probably difficult for, a dealer who's not entirely leaning in on the EV, the used EV thing, especially to help that person the way they need to be helped. Because what we're able to do is let them drive 10, 15 different vehicles, different makes and models, and figure out what it is that they want. Whereas, most dealers, less than 1% of their used inventory is EVs. So it's like they have one car and I can go check it out, and there's probably not a specialist there who can really walk me through that car and EV ownership.
Yeah, I mean, John has told me stories. I mean, for the most part, they've all ended up in transactions, which I guess is ultimately the goal here. But, it's not necessarily on the franchise side, it's like, oh, let's, talk about time and getting people in and out of the store. These are people that are electing to spend several hours into the store. So I guess that's a good thing. It makes your showroom look full all the time.
Yeah, today. I mean, it's that's obviously like a difficult business to scale when every one of those customers needs a very long experience, but it's not all of them. So, and it'll get better.
Yes. So this was the Rivian that I was talking about. So you can see here, there's 2 in-market buyers, but it's been on the lot for 123 days, right? And this is with regards to traffic on the third-party listing site. So what we also want to focus on is, when you're thinking about endemic sites in particular, right, you're looking at how are we generating the traffic, and is it resulting in any real sales velocity or the ability for us to be able to turn that piece of inventory. So using all this data, can be daunting, but it also can give you a lot of insight into, is what I'm paying for helping me turn this inventory, and is it helping me maintain profitability, right? Or what's the cost of having to use this as an outlet for promotion? All right. So on to our next even deeper data set. What we also have talked about for John, because he's got very specific inventory and because there's a growing demand for pre-owned EV. I actually heard something recently that EV used car searches is up like 29%. So obviously it's building momentum. I'll give you some credit for that. Obviously you're driving the recharge, so to speak. Another thing that John and I talked about that was going to be helpful in kind of step 2 in what he's trying to do as an organization is expand his footprint, right? So, all right, so let's not just, in theory say, let's just cast a bigger net and pick up a bigger market area. We're going to use some of our market analytics and data to help understand, is there demand there supportive of him trying to cast a bigger net? So what's your, thought around, using, some sort of technology to say, let me expand my footprint, but I only want to do it in certain areas?
Well, yeah, I guess, just kind of pointing back to what I said before, we have a tremendous amount, I'll tell a lot of people, we only do about half of our business in, Virginia, at least in the like Richmond area. The other half of the business mostly comes out of state, and big chunk of it comes up from North Carolina and then DC metro area, but then we go across these other states. And, certainly if I've got the opportunity to, sell more cars into these markets, whether it's DC, Charlotte, Raleigh, wherever, I want to explore that opportunity. And like our hunch, going into it is that like, yeah, I mean, we're clearly seeing the demand out of those markets, and we've got the product that they're looking for. So how do we get it to them? without just, throwing a bunch of money at a third-party listing site to, to expand my reach. So.
And that's a good point. So if you've got people coming from out of state, I know that like a lot of the states vary with regards to their tax credits and the different incentives that they offer. How does that apply, and what things do you have to be aware of, or what advice would you give dealers that are also trying to sell more EV inventory that would help them kind of avoid pitfalls or understand, the things to look for?
Well, as far as like, any kind of tax credits or incentives that are out there, it's difficult for anybody to know, what every state has available. But there are tools out there that can help you quickly guide, your customer through understanding what they might be. The point of sale tax credit is the easiest because it's federal, and it regardless of what state they're coming from,
right, it applies.
If they qualify and the car qualifies, then we can execute that. So, yeah. If that's helpful.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I do recognize that every state has, a variation of, tax credit. And I think that that's always changing, which is probably why it's hard to put your finger on. But maybe that's part of the reason there's been, a little reluctance, from the franchise side, just because there's these ever-changing, elements that make it difficult to really lean in.
Virginia is a state where there has been legislation passed to create tax credits, for purchases, new and used, but they're not funded. They've never got it funded. So like, it's very confusing for a buyer who's online Googling and they're like, oh, hey, what's up with this Virginia tax credit? And like, well, it exists, but it doesn't exist. And
that's difficult to explain. Awesome. So one of the things that we are really focused on is just understanding what the data is telling us and then how to deploy it, right? So this is just specific data that we were able to extract from an insight perspective for John's store in particular, right? Used EV trends in the DC, Northern Virginia market. Most of this looks like a big eye chart, and we understand that it's not overly, usable because it's pertinent to John, but that's kind of the point, right? Everybody that's responsible for turning inventory has access to, our first-party data that allows us to see demands, trends, changes in the marketplace that we can use to then help you make, informed decisions about how to move your inventory, EV, new, used, or otherwise. If you or anybody in this room or know somebody that is interested in doing a customized report, I'm happy to do so. Just so you guys also know, this data is available online through our market report, and also our VVO is at no charge. So if anybody would like to have an analysis done on their inventory and what the respective traffic sources are doing for your inventory, please let us know. Otherwise, I'm here to answer questions. If you have questions for John, who is my subject matter expert on pre-owned EV, we'd love to answer them. Yeah, I put the data exclamation point on this little.
I'm assuming that your salespeople are having to be very knowledgeable on the types of vehicles they have, because you have such a wide selection. I mean, that's a great thing about it, is if someone is EV shopping, you're basically offering them, I would imagine, an enormous selection all in one place, like a one-stop shop for everything EV. How in-depth do your salespeople need to be with each of the vehicles, and do you automatically give a health chart on each of the cars about its state of health, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll try not to get long-winded here because there's a lot to that. The from an education standpoint, I think we've always said from the beginning that it's going to be a continuously learning environment. We don't know everything, and I would say similar to the traditional side where you have somebody who has spent 12 hours researching a car, and even if it's your brand, they probably know that car better than you do by the time they get there. That's not too dissimilar from the EV buyer. But yes, I mean, we're very familiar with the inventory, the packages, warranty, the issues that happen with the cars, and we continue to learn. We learn more and more about that every day. The second part, as it relates to the health, battery health, or any of those kind of things, I always like remind people that nobody comes into a dealership today and asks like what the state of health on a Chevy Tahoe engine is, right? And like, I think we'll get to a point where there's more confidence in, EVs and batteries, and people will stop asking those questions. Doesn't mean that they're not going to want to know, and the data should be available, but it won't be the thing that like they come in and lead with. So what we've tried to do is create for ourselves a recharge score report. So more than just say like, hey, we've got this Tesla and here's the battery score on it. We want to help them understand like between the condition of the vehicle, the history of the vehicle, the pricing, and the battery. How do I think about all of that? And I'll use a 5-point scale to do it. And that has been very well received by our shoppers. So much so that like even like when we were just piloting it and our website had a score, but there was nothing behind it. Like I say there was nothing behind it on the web page, but they saw it and they would come into our dealerships and say, okay, you guys have 2 Model 3s. One of them is a 4.37 and the other is a 4.42. I want to see the 4.42, but maybe you can tell me why the 4.37 is a 4.37 and not a 4.42. And you're like, so if that's helpful for you.
I had a question about that too, because I asked John, I was like, what's your B back rate on like cars? And he's like, actually his like return rate on pre-owned EVs was far less than it was when you were selling ICE vehicles, right? It's like,
we've only, and you're talking about like a return. So we do have to build confidence for our buyers, we've got a 7-day, no questions asked return policy. And we had 1 car returned. So
in a year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that comparative to when you were on the franchise side.
Yeah. Oh, certainly higher.
Much higher.
I had a question. How do you see the political environment affecting our market in the UCV market?
I think he's asking you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a you question.
Well, I think the number one thing is the tax credit, and I would say that buyers are aware of that today. So buyers are aware of it who are eligible and want to take advantage and understand like maybe I should do something before November just in case. They're making a move this year, but it's difficult. Like certainly, EVs have been politicized. We try to, stay away from all of that. Like we just want to be a place where whatever your motivation is to buy or even consider an EV, we're there to help. So we're not like trying to jam EVs down people's throat and tell them like if they leave and don't buy a car, they're screwing the environment or any of those things. We just stay away from it. But I would say there'll be some impact. I don't think it's as great as we might think, and you don't have to look too far outside of the U.S. to see that. Like, I think EV adoption continues to grow across the world, and it will here eventually as well. So, having better infrastructure will certainly help.
All right. Yes. Hello.
When you're selling used EVs, do you allow those drivers to come back and charge on your facility for a fee or free?
It's a great question. So I have today I have 2 chargers on a lot, which is barely enough to manage my own inventory. I am adding some more, and in the very early days of these transactions, we certainly told people like, yeah, if you're in the area and you want to charge, swing on by. We've stopped telling people that. We've got some friends, and we don't have a lot of space. So yeah, now I think there's all sorts of opportunities in the charging space. It's just not the focus of our business right now. So we'll just stop telling people that.
I'm sure a franchise store would love for somebody to say, hey, can you, I'm in the area, can you give me a full tank of gas?
That's an issue we have at our store where people would expect to not pay for electricity that should be charged. But like you were saying, you don't have customers who pour gasoline card and top it off. We're sort of spoiling them a bit when we do that. And also you might electricity costs will go through the roof unless you have some sort of battery shaving system.
EV chargers, I've said this for a while, EV chargers, like, more and more are becoming like the McDonald's ice cream machine. And, like, you go to a hotel or you look at these reviews online and it's like the chargers don't work. And I'm like, do they not work? Yeah. Or just nobody wants to manage, that. Yeah, exactly. So
that's funny. All right. Anybody else? It's weird. Nobody's asking me questions about data. It's because they're all waiting to talk to me sidebar
and
later.
They should talk to you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. Just real quick, one of the big things at ASOTU CON is networking, so you can find Kelly in the app, connect with her, and ask her any questions there. I'm sure she'd be happy to hear from you.